Starved Rock State Park is rich in geologic and cultural history. Created in 1911, this 2,800-plus acre property is home to fabulous canyons, woodlands, wetlands, and the Illinois River. During this presentation, we'll take a brief look at the cultural history of the area and focus on the formation of the bluffs for which the park is known. By the end of the presentation, you should be able to identify and describe how the multiple forces at work in the park have created this beautiful natural feature. So join me, Lisa O'Brien, as we explore Starved Rock State Park. Starved Rock is named for the Native American story in which the Potawatomi tribe trapped some of the Illiniwek Indians on top of the bluff, now known as Starved Rock. It is told that the Potawatomi and Ottawa Indians encircled and trapped the others on top of the bluff as revenge for killing Chief Pontiac in 1760. With no food or water, they eventually starved, and thus the name Starved Rock. This area has a rich history of Native American and European use. Fur traders began plying their trade in the 1600s, with the height of the fur trade in the mid-1700s. English and French trappers would trade goods for pelts to be sold back in Europe. In 1673, Louis Joliet and Father Jacques Marquette were sent to explore the Mississippi River Basin in search for a way to the Pacific Ocean. By 1683, the French had claimed the area as their own and built Fort St. Louis atop Starved Rock. It was abandoned by the early 1700s due to frequent attacks by the Iroquois. What brought people to this place almost 10,000 years ago? Resources. The Illinois River and its surrounding woodland, wetland, and riparian habitats and bluffs offered the Native Americans plenty of places to find food, water, fertile land to grow crops, a river to travel on, and bluffs to see the approaching enemies. The French wanted these same resources, and battles were fought over these areas all across the eastern part of the United States. The theory of plate tectonics describes how the plates or pieces of Earth's crust move around the planet. In a nutshell, these pieces of Earth's hard outer crust are transported via convection cells. The crust or lithosphere is located atop the asthenosphere, a jelly-like substance. This fluid substance allows the circular convection of hot material in the mantle to move towards the cooler crust, causing the plates to move together and apart. Because of this movement and subsequent changes in sea level, mountains have been formed, continents exposed, and sea floors grow. During the Ordovician period, about 450 million years ago, the area which would become Illinois was located below sea level and near the equator. This warm, shallow sea created much of the bedrock in our area, including sandstone, limestone, dolomite, and shale. The bluffs and areas surrounding Starved Rock are comprised of St. Peter sandstone. Sandstone is a sedimentary rock created from the compaction of sand particles. Imagine you're walking in the ocean, and as you walk, the waves move the sand around your feet in the ebb and flow. Now imagine the water dropping grains of sand at each time the tide is moved. Day after day, just a little more sand layered upon the last thin sand grains. Each of these seemingly thin layers pile upon each other, adding more pressure, much like a human pyramid. And with each layer added, more weight to the bottom. The compaction of the material creates sandstone, or compressed grains of sand. As geologic time progresses, underwater Illinois begins to slowly change. The land mass is moving northward and sea levels are decreasing due to glaciation at the South Pole, exposing more land. During the Mississippian period, 320 to 360 million years ago, you can see how the inland sea is still covering Illinois, but at the end of this period, the sea is receding, becoming shallower, and the mud from the now drying deltas is being deposited through central Illinois. With this deposition of sand and mud, the bedrock materials are being formed and buried by overlying sediments. By the end of these periods, our sandstone is formed and buried. So how are the sandstone bluffs exposed today? For over 1 million years, parts of North America and Illinois were covered with glaciers. Glaciation occurs not by location on the Earth, but by changes in the Earth's tilt and wobble of its axis. Small changes in Earth's orientation to the sun caused cold summers in which snow didn't melt, and winters added additional snows, which accumulated to form sheets of ice from 1 to 3 miles thick in our area. The glaciers advanced from Canada, as evidenced by some of the granite that was deposited here, granite that is only found in the Canadian Shield, some of the oldest rocks on Earth. Glaciers are huge sheets of compacted snow and ice. Glaciers can advance and recede. They advance by moving on a thin layer of water. If you had an ice cube melting on a counter, you would see a puddle form under and around the still solid cube. Glaciers, too, move on the thin stream of water over the land. They recede when temperatures rise and they begin to melt. As glaciers are moving and melting, they deposit sand, gravel, and boulders, which gives us the bumpy topography we see today. But they also scour the land. Illinois was covered with ice 3 different times throughout its history. Each episode covered less ground, with only the very northwestern and southern tips not affected by ice. Terrain in these unglaciated areas are significantly different than in the glaciated areas. The pre-Illinois episode covered almost all of the state and receded 425 million years ago, having covered the area for over 1 million years. The Illinois episode occurred 300,000 years ago, lasting only 175,000 years, with the final Wisconsin episode beginning 75,000 years ago and finally melting away 10,000 years ago. Each glacial episode was followed by a warmer interglacial period. We are currently living in an interglacial warming period. The advancing and receding ice changed Illinois rivers and topography. It was the effect of the melting Wisconsin glaciers that caused the sandstone bluffs of Starved Rock to be exposed. Our story continues with the formation of the Great Lakes. The weight of the glaciers formed depressions in the land. The depressions filled with the meltwater from the glaciers. 14,000 years ago, the ancestral lake bed of Lake Michigan was known as Lake Chicago. The edge of this lake bed was created by a moraine of deposited sand and other materials at the glacial edge. As the meltwaters increased, the force of the water broke through 2 weak points in the area, causing a torrent of water to stream out into part of the Des Plaines River and ending up in the Illinois River. As the meltwaters flooded down the now swollen riverbanks, it eroded the sides and areas all along the channels. As the forceful water reached Starved Rock area, it eroded the sandstone and carried away any sediment that were overlying the area and thus exposing the bedrock. This is a picture of Wildcat Canyon. Notice in the picture the many layers of rock. These layers of sandstone were put down during the time Illinois was underwater, accumulating over millions of years. Looking at the size of the canyon walls in reference to the people, can you visualize just how deep the seas had to be to create this much rock? It has been estimated that central and southern Illinois were under several hundred feet of water. Now notice the shape of the canyon. It has a U shape, very indicative of erosion by water and glaciers. The Illinois River lies behind you as you are looking at the canyon. Large floods could still reach this area, but it is the stream coming from the top of the canyon that is continuing the erosion process today. Periods of freeze and thaw break apart the layers of rock, and constant moving water keeps breaking up the sandstone into its component sand particles. The area was originally eroded by the meltwaters from the glaciers, exposing the underlying sandstone. Water always takes the path of least resistance. The sand and mud-layered rocks of this area were weak and easily eroded. Think about when you may have used a garden hose to water your garden. If the soil is dry or there is loose mulch, the force of the water moves and cars away through the substrate, creating channels. This is much like the powerful water flows from Lake Chicago. This picture is taken at the base of the ice from the previous photo, pictured here on the right. Notice the melting and dripping water and the curvature of the rock. As the water falls and moves down the rock, it is taking very tiny bits of rock with it, eroding the canyon wall further and further back. These canyons have been forming for thousands of years as drainage patterns across Illinois change with each change in sea level and glacial episode. So although erosion from glacial meltwater exposed these lovely canyons, it is unfortunately causing continued damage. In the picture on the right, you can see that this park bench was placed here to admire the scenery. However, the river's edge has eroded away any place to put your feet. In the picture on the left, notice how the roots of the trees are exposed. Plants are regarded as keepers of the soil, but when the soil is being washed away by water, wind, and foot traffic, they become exposed and then pose a hazard as trees begin to fall over, as you can see in the center photo and throughout the park. So now let's take a quick quiz to see what you remember about the formation of Starved Rock. How was sandstone formed? The answer is B, by deposition of sand in early geologic. How were the sandstone bluffs exposed? Erosion, tectonic plates, or the flood? The answer is erosion by glacial meltwaters. How did Starved Rock get its name? By Joliet Marquette, the Illinois on top of the bluff, or Native Americans and their harsh winters? The answer is the Illinois were trapped on top of the bluff. How many glacial episodes shaped Illinois? 1, 2, or 3? The answer is 3, the Wisconsin, Illinois, and pre-Illinois. What lake or lakes helped create Starved Rock? Lake Michigan, the Great Lakes, or Lake Chicago? The answer is Lake Chicago. That's the end of our quiz and our presentation, so I hope you'll go out and visit Starved Rock. It's a great place to go and absorb a little nature and learn a little geology along the way. Thanks for joining me. See you next time.